Welcome to week 26. We are now talking about the metric conversions. Metric is normally not something that is super important in the United States. We're a customary or English system. Again, that's why we normally talk about inches and feet and miles and gallons and cups and quarts. That's what we talked about earlier this year. Well, guess what? Everywhere else in the world, besides a couple of countries, are metric. And that's why we're going to make sure you know what metric is. Because guess what? Metric is super close to you and you didn't even know about it. The metric prefixes are super close, and I'll show you later. But Mr. Morrison just wanted to welcome you and let you know that if we were in person, which is getting apparently very close, we would be doing a lot of measuring because it's hard to understand measuring without measuring. You know what I mean? So, yeah, if you can make videos of you measuring stuff, oh my gosh, that would be a great backpack artifact. Be like, Mr. Morrison, look, I can measure my pencil, and this is how many centimeters it is. Mr. Morrison, this is how many millimeters it is. And I'm like, what? I'm so proud of y'all. So, but again, that will help out the fourth graders next year because, again, they're not going to have school. They're going to have the same amount of school you finish off this year with that they have in fourth grade. So they're not going to be able to get out measuring tapes and measure a bunch of stuff too. So if you make some videos, we can save them for next year if you want. And let's get started. All right. So we're talking about metric, y'all. All right. So there's three things in metric that you need to know. And that's the base. That's the base word. That's the word you're starting with. So when we're talking about the base word with length, that is meter. So everything is going to be something meter. So remember that meter. If they're talking about meters, they're talking about length. If they're saying in grams, that is mass. If you're saying kilograms, because a lot of times weight. You guys think weight, but when you technically go to a different planet, your weight changes, but your mass stays the same. So in a lot of other countries, they don't talk about weight. They talk about mass because they're like, if we send you to the moon, you don't actually weigh that. You weigh something less. So again, craziness, right? And then our last thing is volume. And y'all know about this one because raise your hand if you've ever bought a 2 liter. Liters are metric. Y'all didn't even know that. Like I can't go to Kroger and buy me a cup of Dr. Pepper, but I can go buy me a 2 liter. And if I ain't got no money because I ain't getting paid in like 2 weeks, I might buy a 1 liter to save some money. But guess what? A 1 liter should be half the price of a 2 liter. But guess what? It's not. Usually it's only like 50 cents cheaper. And a 2 liter is like $2. So a 1 liter should be $1. But guess what? They don't do that. They make it $1.50. And you're like, well, the better deal would be the 2 liter. But you're like, I don't want to spend $2 on a 2 liter. But hey, neither here nor there. Let's get this party started. So what we're going to start talking about is the metric system first with length. So we're going to talk about meter. So that's like the yardstick. Again, if we were at school, everyone would be holding a meter stick and be like, look at me, I'm holding a meter stick. It's a sword. I'm like, please put the sword down. But guess what? We're not at school and you can't hit each other with the meter stick. One, because that's not polite and that's not a global competent citizen. That's not very nice either. And yeah, so I know. So meter is like a yard. It's length. So when you're thinking about meter, think about your height because all of y'all my little short friends, you're like a meter tall if you're like 3 feet. You're like, Miss Morrison, we're like 6 feet tall. Don't you know that? I'm like, no, on my screen, you're like 6 inches tall. So I don't really know how tall any of you are. But a meter is usually between 1 and 2 meters tall. Okay? But the most important ones are kilo, like kilometer. Kilometer is 1,000 meters. Centimeter, like Miss Morrison, that's cm. I know that. It's on the ruler. I'm like, I know. But a centimeter is 1/100th of a meter. And you're like, oh, we've talked about fractions. And then millimeter is 1,000th of a meter. So think about that. If you have 1 meter, you have 1,000 millimeters. Ooh, man. So if you have 1 meter, you have 1,000th of a kilometer. You're like, that's Mr. Morrison, that's so confusing. Are you going to show us? Absolutely, y'all. But I also want to show you some that you might hear eventually. Like, for example, a terameter. A terameter, sorry. A terameter is 1 trillion meters. You're like, what? I know. I don't even know what 1 trillion meters is. Like, I haven't even looked that up. But guess what? I know they may pop up one day. But again, all of these are not important. The three that you got to remember are the top ones. One is called a Deca Meter. A Deca Meter is technically 10 meters. A decimeter is 1/10 of a meter, and a micrometer is 1/1,000,000th of a meter. But those bottom ones aren't important. I just wanted you to know. So if you're like, see like a fifth grade meme in like 10 years, and you're like, did your fifth grade teacher tell you decimeter was 1/10 of a meter? You're like, absolutely. Mr. Morrison made this video, but we barely watched it. But he taught us that. And I'm like, and you'd be like, tag me in like a social media post. I'm like, Mr. Morrison, look, we found something. It actually said decimeter, and we knew it because of y'all. I'm like, woo woo. So again, so the main ones you still got to remember are milli, centi, and kilo. So let's get some math going, y'all. Ready? So again, welcome back, guys. So this is one of the ones I want to make sure you see. These are two anchor charts that I normally use if we're at school, but right now we're not at school. And Miss Morrison said I can't put these on my wall for decoration. But if we were at school, these would be on our wall. They'd be inside your notebook. If you ever write these down, these are super important. But it's how to convert from metric. So from go to kilometers to meters, you're going to times it by 1,000. So when you're going from big to small, you multiply, okay? And that's going to make sense in a little bit. And I know this is a lot of information, but when you go from big to small, you multiply. So when I'm going from meters to centimeters, I'm going to multiply by 100. And when I go from centimeters to millimeters, I'm going to multiply by 10. And you're like, Mr. Morrison, what if we're going from meters to millimeters? Well, you're going to multiply by 110, not 110, but 1,000, because 100 times 10 is actually 1,000. So that's 1,000. Mr. Morrison, what if for some weird reason we want to go from kilometers to millimeters? I don't know how many people have ever said, Mr. Morrison, how many millimeters are in 5 kilometers? But hey, it could be a Jeopardy question. You can win me some money. We can share it, okay? But you would take 1,000 times 100, which would be 100,000. So there are, and then times that by 10, there are 1,000,000 millimeters. 1,000,000, y'all. There's 1,000,000 millimeters. What? Well, but that's probably never going to be a question that you need to know. But again, if it's on Jeopardy and you can win some money, send it to me. So, and then right here, these are those ones that I was trying to tell you was hidden. And then again, if these help you, that's fine, because it's going to be kind of a long video of me just talking, and then we're going to start working, y'all. Okay? So, but if we're going from big to small, you multiply. When you go from small to big, you divide. Okay? Big to small, you multiply. Small to big, you divide. All right? All right, welcome back. So we're going to look at 5 meters. And so the first, and you see kilometers here and centimeters. So how many kilometers are in 5 meters? This one's going to be kind of tricky. Because again, remember, when it's kilometers to meters, you multiply. But when it goes to meters and kilometers, that's from small to big, you're going to divide. And you got to divide by 1,000. But guess what? We've taught you the dividing and multiplying by powers of 10, right? So if we're dividing by 1,000, that's 10 to the third. So what you would do is you would write 5. And guess what? You're going to be moving this decimal point. And since we're dividing by 1,000, we're going to move it 1, 2, 3. So our answer is 5 thousandths of a kilometer. What? So 5 meters is only 5 thousandths of a kilometer, because we moved it, because remember, we're dividing by 1,000. So when you go from meters to kilometers, you divide by 1,000. And you're like, but that's 10 to the third power, right, Mr. Morrison? So that's why we're going to move it to 1, 2, 3. Okay, and again, we'll do a couple, and by the end of the week, you're going to feel more comfortable, and that's fine. So, but again, so when you're going from big or small to big, you divide. But when you go from big to small, you multiply. All right. So this one, we're going from big to small. So we're going to be doing some multiplication. So remember, a centimeter is 100th of a meter. So that means that for every meter, there's 100 centimeters. So think about that. So 5, we need to multiply it by 100 because there's 100 centimeters for every meter. So let's think about that. So how would we move our decimal in this one? We're multiplying by 100. That would be 10 to the second power, right? So we'd take our decimal and we'd move it 1, 2. And that's why it is 500 centimeters. What? So in 5 meters, there's 500 centimeters, or 5,000ths of a kilometer. Mind blown. All right, guys, welcome back. And again, I understand if this is super difficult because, again, this is your first time doing conversions and definitely metric. And again, that's why a lot of people are like, we don't like metric. There's so many things we got to remember. But remember, mostly you're just moving the decimal because it's going to be a power of 10. And that's why we focused on power of 10 in the previous weeks. So think about this. This is 12 and 2/10 meters. Remember, if we're going from small to big, we're dividing, and we're dividing by what? 1,000. But remember, that's also saying like divide by 10 to the third power. And if that helps you, man, think about how powerful that is. So remember, when you're dividing by 10 to the third power, you're going to be moving the decimal to the left. Left 3 places. That might be helpful to you. So again, from meters to kilometers, it's divide by 1,000 because you're going from small to big because meters are smaller than kilometers. So let's go. So let's think about 12 and 2/10. If we're going to divide by 10 to the third power, or 1,000, whatever one you're thinking, is you're going to move it 1 place because that would just be 10. 10 to the second, you're like, oh, I'm done. No, you got to add the 0. So 12 and 2/10 of a 12 and 2/10 meter would be 122 10,000ths. What? Of a kilometer. Wow, that's so tiny. Right? Yeah, so that's super tiny, guys. So super, super tiny. So 1, 2, 3. So 12 and 2/10 would turn out to be 12 or 1,000 or 122 10,000ths. Wow. Still mind blowing to me. All right. And since we're going from meters to centimeters, we're multiplying. Since we're going from big to small, we get to multiply. And there are 100 centimeters. So you're multiplying by 100 or times 10 to the second power. And since 10 to the second power, we're going to write 12 and 2/10, but we're going to move our decimal 2 places because 10 to the second power, same as 100. So 1, 2. There is 1,220 centimeters in 12 and 2/10 meters. Guys, wow. Mind blowing. Hi, guys. Last part. Now we're going to look at some of these pages together. So let's think about this. So the key thing to remember, are you going from big to small or small to big? And you can come back to this page as many times as you want, okay? So we're going from big to small. So that means we're going to be multiplying. So how many centimeters are in a meter? Come back here. There are 100 centimeters for every meter. So we're going to multiply by 100. Do you guys see multiply by 100 on here? Perfect. All right. And let's see about this next one. We're going from millimeters to meters. So let's see how far we got to go. So if we're going from millimeters to meter, so we're going to go divide by 10, divide by 100. So let's see, how much would that be? 10 times 100 would be 1,000 because there's 1,000 millimeters in a meter. So let's come back out here. So it's not just 110, it's 10. And then when that's 100, 10 times 100 would be 1,000. So we're dividing by 1,000. You guys see that? Good. I see it too. So again, guys, that's what we're going to be doing. Mr. Morrison's going to be attaching another video to you for length and for volume and for mass or weight, depending on what we're talking about. So again, just try your best, and I know you guys will do fantastic. It is going to be super difficult. So again, good luck, guys.